What's up, everyone? Morey Croson here from the Performance Lab of California, and we have another new breakdown for you today, and it is on deadlifting. It's hard for me to even watch or even look at this picture right here, but it is deadlifting and some of the differences that we'll see in the gym between doing a deadlift like this, really making it so it's a primarily hamstring and glute exercise in comparison to doing it like this, where it ends up being primarily a back exercise. So we'll go right into the information here. Going into what makes a deadlift a good deadlift is from the beginning, and this is where primarily what I tell people is, as you're going down, you really want to make sure you're maintaining your shoulder blades together. And a lot of times I'll see people where they're going to keep like their neck and head up and eyes up as they're going down. We'll show an example of that, and that really negatively impacts the overall movement. You really want your head, and you can see how my alignment of the spine is, how it stays the same throughout, and I'm keeping the bar very close to my body throughout the actual movement. This makes it so now I could really hinge in that hip. We don't want to make it look like a squat where you're letting that butt kind of sink down. You want to just be pushing your butt straight back as you're maintaining that position within your chin and your spine. This makes it so I'm very, very straight when I get to the bottom. And again, look at my being able to maintain the shoulder blade together and keep the back nice and long and extended throughout the movement. Then when I'm coming forward and coming upwards, I really put a big emphasis on driving the weight down through the heels and maintaining a fairly even pace between the rise of my shoulders and the hip, I guess it'd be really extension at the same time, right? So I don't want to end up going where my shoulders are coming upwards too fast, because what will happen then is your hips will stay back and your shoulders end up coming up, which will create a roundness in the spine. You want to be pretty well synced up in that your shoulders are coming upwards as your hips are driving through, to make sure you have the right position. I'm going to move this one. So, some of the things that we can end up doing wrong, right? Here's an example where really keeping that head and neck up. And you can see, you can still maintain a good position within the spine even when you're doing this. It just ends up being harder to maintain that same flat back. You can see this, where my back looks like there in comparison to how it looked at the bottom here. See how it's more flat than this one in comparison to this one. So there's a little bit of a range difference that ends up happening when you really keep that chin up. And then as you initially lift, you end up just putting a little bit more pressure right on like the sacral lumbar kind of junction, like right above the sacrum is where you really feel it when you have the chin up, in comparison to, if you have your chin in a good position, then you're able to disperse the weight a little bit better. Okay, this one I really over-exaggerated, just really poor technique. So you can see on the way down, I just allowed my spine or my shoulder blades to disconnect, right? And this will end up, I see this all the time when kids first start deadlifting. Their first day deadlifting, this is what they do. They allow their shoulders to get away from each other, and they allow their back, and people will really send me videos too of them deadlifting, and their back will look like this. So that's why I felt like there's a need here. I need to be able to give you guys some information on how the proper way to deadlift is. And you can just see where, how big of a difference it is when you're here in comparison to here. It's just way better, way cleaner of a movement when you're able to maintain that spine position in comparison to this, where you're just completely out of whack as you're going through. And then now it makes all the pull happen in the lower back. I was joking with Wes and telling him how my back is like actually messed up because of just doing these deadlifts. These are really, really bad deadlifts, so that's part of the reason why. And you can see here, this is where I let my chin come up too. And that's just really not good when you're coming through. And I mess up my back just doing it for one day. One day of these exercises, and it'll mess you up if you don't do it the right way. All right, now I'm going to just end up going right into traditional deadlifts. We'll go and transition these over. So RDLs and traditional. So traditional, you're just taking it from the ground. A little bit more of a knee bend when you're doing the traditional deadlift. I did kind of mess up here in that. Oh, this one actually is in the back where I keep my chin tucked to my body. The big thing that I would say when you're doing this is you really want to maintain the same amount of lift in your hips as the lift in the shoulders. The same thing that I was kind of talking about last time. The speed. Now it's more of an upward speed where that RDL, you really shift the hips back, and so then it's the speed of the shoulders as you're driving your hips forward and through. Now it's kind of more of like the raise of your shoulders and making that sync up well with the raise of the hips, because what will end up happening is that people will end up extending their knee too early in the movement, and if you get your knee extension, and that's just because your shoulders start or stay down for too long, so you go right into knee extension, right into raising up your hips. Now that makes it so you end up rounding your back more. But you can see here where I was going and kept a good distance there. Now as soon as that bar crosses my knees, now I'm really driving my hips forward and through to maintain a good back position as I'm going through the actual lift. Okay, we'll go here. This first one here, I allow my chin to get a little bit further away from me as I'm lifting up. Overall, not bad though. A little bit more extension in the knees, right? So my shoulders slowed down a little bit more extension in the knees, which made it so I put just a little bit more pressure in the back. You can see now here I lost the positioning, right? So you can see the difference between how my shirt looks here, and there's a little bit more space in comparison to how my shirt looks here, and just how my shoulders are a little bit higher in this one in comparison to this one. So there's just a little bit of a difference if you end up raising up or extending your knees a little bit too early. I exaggerate it more and more as we go, where I start to really, you can see how much I extend my knees there, and then from there just try to lift. And you can see the difference between what my spine looks like here, right? We're at kind of a similar standpoint here, so you can see what it looks like here in comparison to when I just go into a large amount of knee extension right away, and then really have to drive forward and through with my back. This put a lot of pressure onto my back, almost as much as the other ones when I did it. So you really got to be careful with this exercise. There's so many gains that you can get from it. This is the same one where I really extend in my knees. Just look at the original movement, the difference in the original movement where I'm going here, boom, slight extension of the knees in comparison, just like immediate extension of the knees. Again, I see this a lot, guys. I see this a lot. I know it looks really bad, but I see this happen to people a lot. So you got to be focused and be aware of what's going on. And when you're deadlifting, I was going to say it's a great exercise. You can get so much benefit out of it, but if you're doing it incorrectly, then you're going to end up having back problems, and you're going to end up really messing yourself up in the long term. So just make sure you're doing it controlled. Make sure you understand what are the differences between having the right mechanics and not having the right mechanics. Now I start going into really letting my chin go, and then also extending the leg. Now I'm basically only pulling now with my lower back. When I do this with my head and I also extend my knees right away, I'm just putting the lever only on my lower back in order to try to lift it. All right, and so that ends up being a big difference between your overall form is where is the position of your head and neck, where is the position of your shoulder blades, and then what is the overall speed and the relationship between the movement of your shoulders and the movement of your hips. Because if your hips are moving way faster than your shoulders, right, you can see this happening. If your hips are moving faster than the shoulders, then that ends up being a big problem, especially in the traditional deadlift, because now you're going to end up in these types of positions here where you're just putting all your pressure on the lower back. And the issue is that from like a power clean perspective, they actually kind of teach you to drive up and have more extension within the knee, because now once you get to this position, now you get back underneath it and you pop, you bend your knees again, and you get the bar up and underneath it. But the issue is that it only is that part of the movement, right? So just there is when you do the power clean, where then now get right back underneath it, so it doesn't put as much strain on the lower back. But if you go and continue to deadlift like that, the reason I say this is I had a client that said, oh yeah, that's how I was taught to power clean. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense. If you're taught to power clean like this and you're putting yourself at risk for problems, then you're going to end up having problems, right? So just make sure that you're thoughtful of how your back is when you're doing these exercises. I'm making this to make it so you can understand a little bit more. You know, one thing with the RDL to traditional deadlift, kind of seeing the difference there. But the more important thing is when you're doing these deadlifts, RDLs, traditional deadlifts, I mean, straight leg, whatever the case may be, anything that you're doing a deadlift, you have to be aware that there's a certain amount of risk that you're putting yourself in within your lower back. And while it does build up your lower back, and your glutes and your hamstrings, and so it's normal to feel some soreness in your lower back. But if you're walking away from a deadlift workout saying, man, my lower back is sore, and not feeling soreness in your hamstrings and your glutes, then you're probably not doing the exercise right, and hopefully this video will really be able to help you out. All right? As always, guys, thanks for watching these videos. If you have any questions, you could always reach out to me. And, you know, check out some of the stuff we got going. We have a lot of cool stuff going on with speed. We have a lot of cool stuff going with throw. I'm just really trying to provide as much value in the e-commerce online world as I can right now. So if there's anything that we could help you out with, let us know. We'd be happy to do so. As always, thanks for watching these, and we will talk soon.